And yeah, just on the partisan warfare, I think, we've all plunked down our $5 and sat in a movie and watched a heroic film of the French Marquis, Resistance, or the UPA, and then you go on and have dinner somewhere. It's a lot tougher when you have to really bite the bullet and plan out an assassination or a car bombing or something. Let's see if people go beyond the romanticizing to doing the very unpleasant actions that are needed. A lot of concern, especially in Middle East and North Africa, about all the Black Sea ports being blockaded. And I'd like to get your thoughts on whether you think that is Odessa from the land still at threat? And if no, what are the prospects for opening up the ports? There's been the UN, the Turks, a lot of people involved in trying to set up some sort of humanitarian shipping corridor in and out. This has gone nowhere. You can't stop the grain. It's being harvested now. What are the prospects for getting the ports open by the end of August, let's say?
Well, maybe I'll kick off. I mean, actually, the grain, some of it's starting to move. I mean, we've been sending a lot of, it's not quite the capacity and the volumes that generally get sent down to Odessa, but a lot of it has been going overland into Romania. And once we liberated that hunk of rock that's now famous around the world as Snake Island, we have all of a sudden you got these cluster of ships that have come into Constanza and into the Danube Delta to start trying to get this stuff out. So that is one solution. But the overall issue, and I think you're right to raise this, Jim, is that without ports, we really don't have an economy, and the ports are an absolute lifeline for us, at least to have Odessa port open, and hence I think that I think that the offensive is really going to be there as to push them back and to allow us at least to get control of this, but it's still going to be, if we aren't able to liberate Crimea at this point, for example, then we still have a very severe security situation that where and no matter what agreement the Russians sign, as Bismarck said, it's not worth the paper it's written on. I mean, if their lips are moving, they're basically lying. We're dealing with a terrorist state, and that weaponizes everything, and including food, notwithstanding 400 million people rely on Ukrainian grain. So the answer has always been an escort of warships. I mean, there's no reason why NATO could not do this. At some point, you got to start calling Putin's bluff on a lot of the things that he does, and he's been proven to back down in many cases. I mean, he just backed down by in front of the Kazakhs, where he cut off their gas, and they just said, "Yeah, we're no big deal. We're going to go a different way." And he let the gas go. So we have NATO countries in the Black Sea, Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, that could provide a shipping corridor to get Ukrainian wheat and other products out. It's a matter of the political will to do this. And if we don't, you're creating another bad precedent, that you're basically agreeing that the Black Sea is Putin's bathtub. It's his lake, and these are international waters.
Yeah. And obviously he wants it to be a Russian sea, a Russian lake, and the Turks obviously do not want that. So, and there would have to be, and then 3 NATO countries again are Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania, and there'd have to be a NATO escort, because if you leave it up to private insurers, Lloyd's of London will charge twice the value of the cargo to get it from the Bosphorus to Odessa and back. So you really have to have some sort of government guarantee. Any thoughts on this, Andy, about any land threat to Odessa?
I don't think Odessa's under much threat. I know there's activity down there. I was at a dinner last night, and someone talked about reports from their family about Skadovsk seeing a lot of activity for some reason but the Russians have made several attempts at the amphibious demonstrations toward Odessa and several approaches. But the Bug River and Nikolaev are a fairly overwhelming obstacle for land connectivity, and the Russians have demonstrated no skill at amphibious warfare. So and even if they were to get it amphibiously, the logistics behind supplying it would be very difficult. So I'm not too worried about Odessa in that capacity.
You know, there's a history there that there's a artificial fort in the middle of the mouth of the Dnipro between, I guess, Kherson and maybe his Mykolaiv regions. And our US Navy hero, John Paul Jones, was hired out to, I think, Catherine the Great and helped defeat the Turks there. So there's a long history of trying to control the mouth of the Dnipro River and how crucial it is. Yeah, another thought, and maybe I'll throw this by you, Andrii. Kissinger, as you know, came out in Davos suggesting some sort of land for peace deal. Kissinger doesn't have a great track record with peace talks, since he did peace talks with the North Vietnamese, and then North Vietnamese marched into Saigon a year later. So be careful about getting into peace talks with Henry Kissinger's seal of approval. But there is a certain school of thought, maybe the isolationist wing of the Republican Party and the left wing of the Democratic Party, who say, well, gee, you know, this isn't our fight. Let's just give them the Donbass and we can sign a deal and get everything back to so-called normal. How do you think Ukrainian public opinion looks on the idea of land for peace? And could Zelensky ever even sell that to the Ukrainian public opinion?
First of all, I think that the old Republican Kissinger, he doesn't like young Democrat Biden. So that's why I think they continue this long-term confrontation between Republicans and Democrats, and Kissinger definitely use any opportunity, you know, to stick administration. Definitely, there were a lot of these voices, not only in the United States, but partially in Europe, especially in France and Germany. And I'm personally fighting with this very dangerous word ceasefire, because for the last couple of months, I strongly believe that the only beneficiary of ceasefire is Putin. Because as we discuss even now in our video call, it's understood that Russia has a lot of problems with this campaign, and they would be happy to have a break, but with keeping territories which they temporarily occupy. For us, it's absolutely unacceptable. As from tactical point of view, I mean, from the military point of view, as definitely from political point of view, because we understand well that this salami approach is one of the favorite tactics of Russians. So to slide territories piece by piece. And if we froze the conflict, there is zero doubts that the Russians will come back again, and we will lose again the parts of Ukraine. So that's why I think we went so far in this war now, that now this war cannot be stopped. And that's another very risky word, because I think this war can be or won or lose. So there is no middle, you know, for this war. And I think the public opinion in Ukraine is exactly on this direction. So we are ready to fight, and we demonstrate this on the daily basis. And I think Zelensky is smelling the air very good. He understands that it is impossible to even open the mouth for any compromises or so-called compromises. And I think it was very well delivered to our European allies. You remember this visit of Macron, Scholz, and Italian friends. And now everybody knows the secret that the original plan was not just to visit Irpin and Bucha, but they were probably was trying to find some model of stopping this war. But Zelensky was very straight to them. And that's exactly the reflection of emotions in Kyiv and in Ukraine, that we are not going to trade, we are not going to negotiate with Russia until we will not liberalize our territories. Definitely, there is a point on which stage of liberalization we're ready to open negotiations. Zelensky was several times referring to the borders of the February 24, but I have a lot of doubts, because if we will be able to push them back to the borders of February 24, it will mean that we will be able to push them even further. So at the moment, I think no peace talks are possible. The only things which is happening, as you discussed previously, is a grain issue. And I will add a little bit, if you allow me 2 more minutes, that today, in fact, the negotiations was, the next round of negotiations was completed. And few vessels, I think, already will be loaded. And in fact, partial deblocking of Odessa port is happening now. But I think we need to look at this as a bigger picture, because there is problem of grain which we currently have in Ukraine. And all the stories, by the way, about land trafficking of the grain has not much sense, because the experts were saying that we need from 5 to 6 years to take all the grain which we currently have in Ukraine by trucks. So meaning that it is impossible. But for me, it's the biggest concern of the grain of this season. So that's why now it's very dangerous political game with unblocking of Ukrainian ports with the grain of the previous season, because we need to guarantee that we will be able to deliver the grain of this season in 2023. So that's why the story is even more complex than one may think.
Yeah, it's very clear that Putin is using gas and grain as blackmail commodities against the Europeans and against essentially the third world. Slightly different topic, sort of a footnote, which Americans often don't quite focus on, which is your northern neighbor, Belarus. Do you think that Lukashenko will continue sort of sitting on the fence, letting the Russians use his country as a platform for the war, but not involving Belarusian soldiers? What's your sense on where the Belarus situation is going?
I had conversations with contacts I have in the border guards, and they tell me that they don't see the formation of any significant attack groups that would signal a massive invasion by Russian or a mixture of Russian Belarus forces. I think politically it's pretty clear that Lukashenko is walking the tightrope of his life, literally right now, because there is apparently zero appetite in Belarus society, in Belarus army, let alone Belarus society, for a war in Ukraine. They saw what was in their hospitals coming from Kyiv, in and around Kyiv, and the kind of shape the Russian soldiers were in. When they were going into Belarus hospitals. My bigger concern, and of course you've got all the swamps and everything else. We talked about land. I mean, it's just not an easy terrain to get across. But by continuing to do these exercises and war games and things like that, he does tie up troops that we could be using on our 2,500 kilometer front line that we have to keep in the north. And my biggest fear is from the air, because you hear reports of more and more rockets coming into Belarus and bombers and AWACS planes and things like that. And it's an open question: where are those going to be used, and what are they going to be supporting? The checkpoints around Kyiv have tightened up considerably. And it's not quite as easy to get in and out of the city as it was two and a half weeks ago. So I think that people are taking the threat seriously, and the authorities are. But so long as Lukashenko's in power, I think that he understands that if he invaded, used his armed forces, that he'd be finished.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He depends on Putin for his job. On the other hand, if he does what Putin wants him to do, he would then definitely lose his job. So he's trying to find some middle path. Yeah. By the way, Dan, Andy, Andrii, What's life like in Kyiv today? Are the restaurants open? Are some of the restaurants open? Is there people
It's raining.
running?
Life is pretty good. I'd say the restaurants, you got the 11 o'clock curfew and you got less traffic. Other than that, day to day, I haven't seen much different from a year ago. It's a lot different from 3 months ago, but it's improved. And I don't know how many people are back, but I'm guessing 75%. It's other than having to take a train to Warsaw to get out of the country, and having a curfew for night owls like yourself, Jim. It's not much different.
All the
probably
closed. Yeah, so it sounds like it's, I hate to say it, but not a good comparison, but it's better than the first lockdown when you could have taken a nap on Krashatik and the town was really shut down in March of 2021.